How does one war lead directly to another? It's a question that, honestly, has kept historians up at night for decades. So today, we're going to trace that very path, from the muddy trenches of World War I all the way to the rise of the Third Reich. We'll explore how the end of one massive conflict actually created the perfect storm for the next one.
So, the big question we're really digging into in this explainer is a heavy one. It's a story of cause and effect, where the shockwaves of one disaster created the perfect conditions for an even bigger one. Definitely keep this question in the back of your mind as we go through this. All right, so where does this all start? Well, like so many huge historical shifts, it all comes down to a single, seemingly small event, a spark that would light an unimaginable fire across the globe. Let's set the scene. The date is June 28th, 1914. We're in Sarajevo. And at this exact moment, you have to understand, Europe is this incredibly complex web of alliances, rivalries, and tensions. Basically, it's a giant powder keg just waiting for a match. And this is the match. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, the man who was next in line to rule a massive empire. Now, this wasn't just the murder of one person, it was a direct attack on a powerful institution, an act that would basically pull the trigger on a global scale. The fallout from this is immediate, and it is absolutely catastrophic. That single event in Sarajevo kicks off a domino effect of war declarations. And within just a few weeks, all the great powers of Europe are mobilizing for what would eventually be called the Great War. And just like that, the spark becomes an inferno, a war on a scale that humanity had literally never seen before. A conflict so terrible that people at the time desperately hoped it would be the war to end all wars. This timeline, it just can't do justice to 4 years of unimaginable bloodshed, but it gives us the key moments. Think about the Battle of the Somme in 1916. Over 1 million casualties. The sheer human cost is just staggering. But by 1918, the war had worn everyone down, not just on the battlefield, but back home too. A mutiny among German sailors was really the final straw, and just a few days later, the guns finally fell silent.
And this right here, this is the crucial point. You have to understand this part. Yes, the guns fell silent, but the anger, the bitterness, the deep resentment, and all the instability, that didn't go anywhere. The end of the war wasn't a resolution. It was just a doorway into a new kind of conflict.
So, that leads us straight into the aftermath. And this period, this so-called peace, well, it turned out to be just as explosive as the war itself. Not even a year after the fighting stopped, the terms of peace are laid out. The Treaty of Versailles was incredibly harsh on Germany. It meant losing territory, having its military crippled, and, the most famous part, the War Guilt Clause. This forced Germany to take all the blame for the entire war. You can just imagine the deep, lasting sense of national humiliation this created.
So into this fertile ground of humiliation, a really poisonous idea was planted. You had these prominent military leaders, guys like Paul von Hindenburg, who started pushing this stab-in-the-back myth. It was a complete lie. It claimed the German army was never actually beaten in the field, but was betrayed by its own people, politicians, socialists, and Jews back home. For a nation that was desperate for an explanation, this was a powerful and very seductive story. And here's where you see the real damage of that lie. Instead of the country coming to terms with a military defeat, this narrative of betrayal just completely took over. It gave a wounded nation a scapegoat, and it created the absolute perfect environment for extremist ideologies to start growing.
Which brings us to our final piece of the puzzle, the new fire. Now we get to see exactly how all that post-war anger was captured and harnessed by a new, radical political movement. You have to picture Germany at this time. The country is in chaos. Its new democracy, the Weimar Republic, is incredibly fragile. It's dealing with economic collapse and political violence on the streets. And in all that chaos, a lot of Germans were just desperate for a strong leader and a simple answer to all their problems. This slide really lays out just how deliberately the Nazi Party built its power base. Look at the timing. In 1919, right as that stab-in-the-back myth is spreading, Adolf Hitler is already writing about the so-called Jewish question, which was just a chilling way of talking about persecuting and removing Jewish people from society. Their party platform in 1920 was built on that anti-Semitism and an extreme form of nationalism. Even a failed coup in 1923 didn't stop them. By 1925, Hitler was back, more determined than ever. This was a methodical, calculated climb to power. So what's the bottom line here? It's this. The unresolved anger from World War I, the national shame from the Treaty of Versailles, and that poisonous stab-in-the-back myth, they all came together to create the exact conditions that Nazism needed to thrive. The path wasn't accidental. It was a direct, clear line from the war's aftermath.
And that leaves us with this final, really sobering thought. The story we just walked through is a stark reminder of how easily the ashes of one conflict can become the fuel for the next one. It's a lesson from history that we really can't afford to forget. Thanks for joining this explainer.